Samuel Rourke had lived alone on his ranch for so many years that folks in town barely remembered the sound of his voice. A man shaped by loss and hardened by silence, for he had buried a wife taken by childbirth and a son stolen by fever, leaving him only with his cattle, his fences, and the endless wind across Hollow Creek. He worked from dawn until dark, never speaking to anyone, convincing himself that loneliness was safer than love, until one blistering summer day, he saw dust rising on the trail, and 10 riders appeared, Apaches, thin, weary, their ponies stumbling, children among them with hollow eyes that mirrored hunger and despair. Samuel's hand went to his rifle, but when the gray-haired leader lifted his hands and whispered, "Shelter, water, no fight," the rancher saw not enemies but people on the edge of collapse, and something deep in his heart stirred. He could have turned them away, could have hidden behind old fears and the prejudice of his neighbors. Yet instead he pointed toward the barn and muttered, "Water's in the trough, shades inside." And so the strangers drank, rested, and for the first time in years his land held voices other than his own. That evening Samuel set down a pot of beans and cornbread without a word, watching as pride gave way to hunger, and the leader nodded with quiet gratitude. In the days that followed, the Apaches helped mend fences and carried water, while Samuel found himself teaching the younger boys how to brush horses, each silent act weaving a fragile bond of trust. At night he heard them sing soft, haunting songs that rose like prayers to the desert sky, melodies that touched the buried ache of family he thought long gone. Samuel knew he risked everything: neighbors, soldiers, even his own safety, but for the first time in decades, he felt the heavy chains of solitude begin to break, and he realized that perhaps his story was not over. Perhaps fate had brought these 10 souls to Hollow Creek to awaken the part of him that still longed for connection. And friends, if this beginning gripped your heart, if you want to see what dangers Samuel will face when the outside world learns what he has done, make sure to subscribe right now, because Chapter 2 will test his courage, loyalty, and the fragile hope that has just been rekindled. For a while, Samuel's ranch felt alive again, filled not only with the sound of wind and cattle, but with voices, songs, and the steady rhythm of people sharing burdens. Yet he knew peace was fragile, and it shattered one morning when Clayton Harper, his bitter neighbor, rode up with 2 men, eyes narrowing at the Apache ponies near the fence. "You've lost your mind, Rourke," Harper spat. "The army'll hang you for hiding savages." But Samuel stood firm, saying they were only hungry souls needing rest, which made Harper sneer and gallop off with a promise that soldiers would hear of it. The Apaches prepared to leave, fearing trouble, but Samuel, hardened by years of solitude, told them they would never survive weak and starving on the trail. So they stayed a few more days, helping with chores, mending fences, and even laughing with Samuel in rare, fleeting moments that reminded him of family long gone. But danger came swift as thunder, for at dusk soldiers appeared, rifles gleaming, their captain barking orders to seize the barn, declaring the Apaches fugitives. And Samuel stepped into their path, his weathered face resolute as he growled, "Not while they're under my roof," his voice carrying a lifetime of grief and stubborn courage. Rifles lifted, knives unsheathed. The night crackled with the promise of blood, until the gray-haired Apache leader raised his hands and spoke softly. "We want only food, water, peace." And for a heartbeat the soldiers hesitated, torn between duty and conscience. Samuel seized the moment, his voice breaking like thunder. "The law didn't save my boy, didn't save my wife, but I can save them, and I will." And the fire in his eyes forced even hardened soldiers to lower their guns, unwilling to start a massacre. The captain cursed, threatened to return, then rode off into the dark, leaving Hollow Creek silent once more. That night the Apaches sang beneath the stars, gratitude heavy in every note. And when morning came they saddled their ponies, the leader clasping Samuel's hand with one word, "Brother," before vanishing into the desert. Though silence returned, Samuel no longer felt alone, for his ranch now carried the memory of trust, courage, and a bond stronger than fear. And friends, if this ending touched your heart, if Samuel's stand reminded you of the power of kindness, make sure to subscribe right now, because more stories of the Old West are waiting here to inspire and move you. Weeks passed after the Apaches rode away, and Samuel's ranch seemed to fall back into its old rhythm. Yet he was no longer the same man. He found himself pausing at dusk, listening for voices that were gone, remembering laughter around the fire and the word, brother, that had bound him. Two men once called enemies, but the peace he clung to cracked one autumn afternoon when smoke rose from beyond the ridges and a wounded Apache boy staggered onto his land, collapsing by the water trough, arrows in his side, whispering that soldiers had attacked their camp and scattered the survivors. Samuel's heart twisted, for though he could have turned away, fear forgotten neighbors and the law, he instead carried the boy into his cabin, cleaned the wounds with trembling hands, and vowed he would not let the kindness once given him die in ashes. 2 nights later, under the cover of moonlight, Samuel saddled his horse, rifle slung across his back, and rode toward the smoke, guided by the faint tracks of ponies and boots, until he found a hidden canyon where women, children, and a few warriors huddled in despair, their leader the same gray-haired Apache lifting his head in weary recognition. They hunt us, he rasped, we have nowhere left. And Samuel knew then that his choice was no longer about hospitality but about justice, about standing for those who had no one. He opened his barns, gave what food he could spare, and when Harper arrived with more townsmen demanding Samuel hand them over, Samuel stood on his porch with rifle in hand, declaring, this land's mine, and so is my choice. Cross my fence, and you'll answer to me. And though the mob cursed and threatened, none dared test the iron in his voice. Days of tension followed, whispers in town calling Samuel a traitor, but slowly a few neighbors began to soften, seeing the Apaches were not raiders, but families fighting to live, and Samuel's defiance planted seeds of courage in others. Winter crept across Hollow Creek, and though the struggle was far from over, Samuel felt alive in a way he hadn't in decades, no longer just a lonely rancher, but a man with a cause, a protector of a bond forged in hardship. And dear friends, if this next chapter of Samuel's fight stirred your heart, if it reminded you that one person's courage can shield many, then don't forget to subscribe right now, because more powerful tales of the Old West are coming. Stories of honor, sacrifice, and hope that you won't want to miss. Winter settled hard on Hollow Creek, blanketing the valley in frost, yet Samuel's ranch pulsed with a life it had not known in years. Smoke curling from the chimney, children's laughter weaving with the creak of the windmill, and though hunger gnawed and supplies thinned, there was warmth in the company of those who had once been strangers. But danger had not vanished, for word spread beyond town that Samuel Rourke was harboring Apaches, and soon riders came with the sheriff at their head, demanding Samuel surrender the families in his care, warning that if he resisted he would be branded an outlaw. Samuel stood tall on his porch, the old rifle resting across his arms, and though the sheriff's men outnumbered him, he declared in a steady voice, I've buried too much to fear burying myself. These people say, or you'll have to ride through me to take them. And silence hung heavy until the sheriff, weighing the cost, pulled his men back with a promise that the army would soon come instead. The Apaches urged Samuel to let them leave before soldiers arrived, but Samuel, staring into the cold horizon, shook his head, knowing that if they scattered again, they would be hunted like deer in the snow. So together they worked as one, chopping wood, salting meat, digging trenches, and preparing for a siege they all felt would come. One night, by the fire, the gray-haired Apache spoke of his people's struggles, of betrayal and loss, and Samuel in turn spoke of his wife and boy. And in that sharing of grief they found a brotherhood deeper than blood. When the army finally rode in, bluecoats glinting under the pale winter sun, their captain ordered Samuel to step aside, calling him a fool. But Samuel, heart-pounding yet unshaken, answered, maybe I am, but I'll be a fool who chose to stand for what's right. And though the soldiers surrounded the ranch, the townsfolk began to arrive, neighbors who had once cursed Samuel now standing at his fence, some armed, some empty-handed but present, their quiet presence declaring they would not watch injustice in silence. The captain, seeing resistance where he expected none, ground his teeth and withdrew for the moment, vowing to return, leaving Samuel with the knowledge that battle still loomed. But hope had begun to stir in Hollow Creek. And friends, if this chapter's stand for courage and unity has moved you, if it reminds you that one voice of defiance can inspire many, then don't forget to subscribe right now, because more powerful chapters of Samuel's fight are on the way. Tales of loyalty, sacrifice, and the untamed West that you won't want to miss.